Hey guys, welcome to the channel. I'm Dan. I'm out here on a project where we just got an insulation pass for, meaning that the project is ready to install drywall. And we went through this pretty substantially with foam and sealed every gap and every crack that we could find. And then because this is a project that's on a budget, we are doing R19 batt insulation, pink insulation. It's kind of what everybody's accustomed to. And I've seen plenty of things online about, oh, this isn't the professional version of insulation. And the truth is, R19, R13, etc. batt is probably the least useful insulation. But the top three things you can do to insulate a project are: 1, air seal the project; 2, really good attic insulation; and then 3, good wall insulation. And the truth is that air sealing is just a process. It's not a very expensive thing to do, but it can just be a laborious process to look at the structure, which we've already done, and go through it with a fine-tooth comb and figure out where all the air might be getting in or where it might be getting out. So the second thing is attic insulation. All of your heat is rising, and the more insulation you have on the attic, the more barrier you have between outside heat or cold, the better your envelope is going to perform. And then 3 is wall insulation. And when we get to wall insulation, you can spend a lot of money on really nice and really expensive insulation, like spray foam, like closed cell spray foam being the most expensive, followed by open cell spray foam. And then you can go to rock wool, all of these, rock wool, all of these are really good products. But the reality is that even if you used the most expensive product, if you don't air seal, if you don't put good gaskets around your doors and windows, which probably windows and doors is probably the 4th best thing you can do. Obviously, if you are not using good windows, that's an air sealing problem. But I'm going to show you around this project and show you some of the things that we did to try to bring a project that is a budget project using batt insulation up as high as it can get on a insulation rating. The inspector said he thought it was a really good job of sealing this thing up, and I'm just going to get right to it. One of the things we did was we went ahead and used spray foam and fire foam, which is basically interchangeable, on any place where there was a beam that came in from the outside and made a penetration into the wall. Foamed every gap and every crack, even between members that are tight to each other, so that there's no air gap between them. Obviously, we filled small gaps with foam instead of with just a little bit of torn up insulation. Foamed around all the doors, all the edges of the doors, all of the framing. Again, there was a gap there, so we went ahead and sealed that. So we ended up just foaming every joint where the chipboard, which is the outside sheeting, met the framing. We ended up foaming anywhere that there was gaps between 2 pieces of framing lumber, so if any air is wanting to come through, it stops it there. And then we went ahead on thin walls, in any area where we're going to have to cut our insulation on these thin cavities, we went ahead and foamed inside of them to just add a little bit of protection, since batt insulation is classically difficult to install in this area. So that is one area of concern when you're going to use batt insulation, that you really want to get all of those joints sealed up as well as you possibly can. And then the second thing I'm going to show you is a tool. Here's the tool. Doesn't seem like much. It's just a couple of nails taped onto a stake. And what it's going to allow me to do, and once I'm not filming, I'm going to put on an air mask. What's going to allow me to do is just take a stake like that. It's getting my insulation into the cavities and pushed all the way up. And
so I don't have to move a ladder around to get the top in. So what I'll do once I get all of the full bats laid is I'll go and I'll staple them all from the ladder height down, staple these into their cavities with these little tabs, and then we'll come back through, we'll flip this up, and we'll make a cut so that the wire is not compressing our insulation along these lines. And that will help us to get all of this tucked in nicely and fill that cavity with bat insulation. Bat insulation is not the absolute best, but it is the most cost-effective way to get your home insulated. It does exceed code, but you have to keep in mind code is the minimum requirement for building safety and for energy efficiency. So there's things you can do that are a lot better than bat insulation, but they all cost money, and they cost more money than bat insulation. So in this kind of budget build we're doing, it's going to be bat insulation. It's going to be better than code for this area, and we're going to keep on moving, keep the progress going. So a small gap like that, you're not going to get very much fiberglass insulation, so we just went ahead and foamed it. Back in these corners, it's going to be hard to reach, but we went ahead and foamed them. So while my insulators did a pretty good job, I can find places in the project where there's a little gap. This is the garage wall connection, and I can see a gap. So I'm gonna just foam through those just to make sure that there's not a gap in insulation. So this bat might be an R19 bat, but if you have a gap here, that's 0. There's no insulation value there. If that bat was tucked really tight in like that, and there's just this void, then that's also not going to perform well. And so this is why you can see bat insulation is kind of vilified, because it's just too easy to leave gaps and cracks in places. And so, yeah, maybe 80 or 90% of your job is R19, but you know, there's these places where there's just nothing. So we're gonna go back and we're gonna foam in between those. Even though this has already been passed by an inspector, we're still gonna follow up and insulate more than he's asked for.
One of the things that you'll notice is that the insulation itself is cut at a slight angle, and that's just a factory thing. So the R19 insulation isn't even going to fill that gap properly every time.
Another thing that we did is we used a caulking and we sealed the connection between the foundation and the plate. And unfortunately, if this shrinks,
some of these spots might, you know, break open and there might be a small gap. There's also a foam under that plate that is going to create an air seal. As far as the inspector, inspectors are supposed to be making sure that you're doing the minimum requirement by code. They're not there to tell you you need to do a better job at your job. So you can't rely on an inspector to make sure that your job is the best job that it can be. You've got to do that yourself, because based on the inspector, if an inspector is, you know, kind of nitpicky, he might find something like those gaps and he might say, you know, you need to fix that. But technically that wall is insulated with R19 and the bats are filling the gap. And behind any of these structures, if you look at the front side of this, he doesn't have any way of inspecting to see, well, how is that insulation laying inside of that cavity? Is it tucked in there? Is it bunched up on one side? He really has no way of knowing that. It's kind of up to you as the insulator to make sure that these things are not just done, but that they're done well. The reason that I'm not afraid of or concerned by this insulation not being spray foam or not being dense pack insulation, which dense pack is one of my favorite wall insulations, just because not only does it have a good insulation value and good sound value, when you spray insulation into a cavity, it gets into every nook and cranny. So it actually creates a solid insulation package, where this R19, I mean, I would probably rate R19 bat insulation, technically speaking, performance-wise, around a 13 or a 12 at best, I think. I think the best insulator is not going to get the best performance out of R19. They're not going to reach the technical specifications just because of the nature of the product and how it works. Air sealing, number one thing you can do, followed by really good attic insulation, and then followed by really good wall insulation, windows, and other performance enhancers that you can do. If you're doing your own project, spend the extra time air sealing your project, because you're going to get way more out of that activity than the money that you're spending on it. So the bang for your buck doing air sealing is very high compared to other insulation things that you can do. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.